What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Keith and Mike Watch Deep Space Nine. Today, we are talking about Season 2, Episode 17, Playing God. My goodness, myself in my ears is way too loud today. How's it going, Mike?
That's usually my experience, but I've honed it in. Keith, I was watching the episode this morning and realized at the 25-minute mark, which theoretically is actually where the episode starts, but it's also where Mike Watches Deep Space Nine starts this week, because I did not hit record. I just talked to literally no one for 25 minutes. And then it was like, should I go back and start over? And I was like, hell no.
No, there's no time. There's no time. We had to hurry up and record.
Keith, let me ask you, are you hearing a clicking popping on my sound, on my side?
No,
okay.
You sound fine on
so
my
it's probably not recording it, and it's probably just the lack of delay on my side. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, boy, now that is an assumption we are going to regret later, like every one of our assumptions. But yeah, okay. Well, but your computer's back, because yesterday we recorded Keith and K&M Geekly. What the hell's the show called? And your computer had fried.
My computer had fried, but the laptop worked. Your computer didn't blow up. Your frames were mostly available, and
it's a miracle. It was a Christmas miracle. While we talked about your favorite Christmas movies, and I tolerated it.
It dropped literally as late Monday as possible because it was Tuesday.
Yes, Tuesday is technically very late Monday.
Very late Monday.
Very late Monday. Yes. Well, I think that explains a lot about us. So, so this is an episode we are going to discuss.
But before we do, Keith, I should say the following. I think this is important, in fact. Do you know who gets us? There's a small group of people who understand that it's usually an S show. Somebody's computer's going to melt. Someone's going to forget to hit record. Someone's going to forget to put their face on it, so it's just a smiling picture as the audio plays. And that's our patrons, Keith. Why don't you say who are the lucky, the few, the proud, the fiscally irresponsible?
I was going to say, like, I few, 100% true. Proud, I don't know about that. Fiscally responsible, definitely not true. So we have descending orders of truthfulness in what you just said, but we do have no descending orders of gratitude to Brian Kaufman, Casey Clark, Cloud Lover 69, Jason Moe, Andrew Hayes, Jorge Navoa, The Mysterious Anne and the Mysterious, Worf's Boot Shivs, CRM Productions, Charles Babbage, at Grim Toys, Delusions at Noon, and Eric Wilson. You can join them at patreon.com/KNM, spell out that and you can get the incredible bonus features, such as the last 15 minutes of Mike watching Deep Space Nine. That is what you are paying the big bucks for. I'd pay the big bucks for seeing Mike just sitting on the floor talking to himself, because it's not recording. Because I feel like that is probably a better encapsulation of what's really going on in Mike's head.
That's true.
Let's talk about what was going on in my head, at least, in 1994.
Yeah, when did this air?
This aired, Playing God aired on February 27th, 1994. The top song continued to be, I can't wait to hear it. Let's hear a little Celine, The Power of Love, Mike.
Sometimes I am frightened, but I'm ready tonight for the power of love.
And we're going to need a clip from the top movie, which once again took over. It took a week off, but it's back because that happened back in the 90s. Ace Ventura is back.
Guano. Wait, no, wait. Which one? The first one?
The first one, guano, was your best quote.
The second one is about batshit, which is guano. I thought it was pretty deep. The first one I'm going to give you, laces out.
Okay. Thanks very much. I was hoping for a cameo by Dan Marino, but no such luck. All right. Well, let's say we had already seen Ace Ventura, and we had already listened to The Power of Love by Celine Dion. How else could we have spent our time waiting for Deep Space Nine to air?
Well, Keith, the Winter Olympics. I'm going to Saturday. There's not as much good stuff listed on TV Tango, which is the website I look at, on Sundays. So I'm going to go for those of you who are watching in the Saturday market. We have some cool stuff, Keith, because I know you've dabbled in writing a little bit about Murder, She Wrote. You wrote a musical about that.
I did, and now it's Murder, She Dead.
Yeah. If you are even remotely interested in Murder, She Wrote, which I hope you are, there's a channel, this creator, Pushing Up Roses, and she just does dissections of Murder, She Wrote episodes. It is chef's kiss. Anyway, but one of my faves outside of Murder, She Wrote is Columbo, Keith, and there was a Columbo movie on ABC on this date, which I love, which led right into a new episode of The Commish, which you know I loved, so I was probably tuned to ABC that day. On CBS, there was the Winter Olympics, so I probably was watching that. We had my favorite Fox block, Cops, America's Most Wanted, Cops, over on Fox. And Sunday Night at the Movies, Keith, I love it. It's so weird, because one of my great jokes that was not captured on Mike Watch's Deep Space Nine is when the little proto-universe attaches itself to the ship. I quoted, "It's not a Tuma."
It's not the Duma.
And guess what was on NBC at 8 o'clock, Keith?
Twins?
Kindergarten Cop.
Kindergarten Cop. Oh, okay.
Which is crazy that showed up twice today. I don't know what that means. Probably nothing, but there you have it. Keith, that's what's on TV. Go ahead.
Wait, no, it's not Kindergarten Cop. It's not the Duma. It's the one where he gets pregnant.
Which is twins. No, but it's not the Tuma is Kindergarten Cop, because I think one of the kids is like, it's a tumor. I'll look it up while you talk.
It's not the Duma. All right. Well, so now that we've got...
Ladies and gentlemen, just a quick fact check. This just in from the news desk. Mike was right.
Oh, okay. We have a bumper for Mike was right somewhere, but I think it's from the other podcast. All right. So in the hard news this week...
That'll do.
Oh, that indeed will do. So in the weekly world news, this is ghoulish. We found out that a Challenger astronaut is found alive on a tiny island in the Bahamas. That is ghoulish. And so usually funny. This one is like, ooh, really? Even 12 years later, only 8 years later. Oh my God, math.
Yeah, math.
That's crazy. For those of us who are old enough to remember that, I am.
Like Elvis spotted alive, the what do you call them? The Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot spotted at a Denny's. Those are all good. But like a dead astronaut that blew up in a national traumatic disaster a couple years ago.
Freaking watched live in school?
That feels like a rough one. Must have been sweeps weeks over at the Weekly World News.
Yikes. Yeah, I mean, for the youngins out there, on Challenger, which of course exploded, they had a teacher on the shuttle. It was the first civilian to go up, and she was a teacher. And so it was a tie-in with a lot of school stuff. So a lot of us watched the launch live in our classrooms and had to watch that take fold. I was 6 years old, and I had to watch that thing live. So, yeah, I remember that well. And I wouldn't have used that one. Weekly World News, normally so responsible and normally so hard-hitting. All right, so let's talk about this episode, Playing God. It was directed by David Livingston, who last directed Rivals. It has a teleplay by Jim Trombetta, Michael Piller, and Jose Molina. This is his only Trek, and he was uncredited, with a story by Jim Trombetta. So let's do some trivial trivia. I got something fun loaded up for this. I can't wait. Unfortunately, because Mike's running it. Oh, right. Do a bumper. With trivial trivia. Bling. Yeah. Forgot we had a bumper.
All right, buddy.
All right. So first off, we see it, Cisco and Dax playing a chess game. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the board really carefully, you can see that they're actually playing the very famous Donnelly Byrne versus Bobby Fischer game from 1956.
Oh, that's a nice little Easter egg.
So somebody, thought to do that and put in those famous moves, and then somebody caught it. All of that is impressive. Also in this episode, we see Richard Poe making his first appearance as Gul Evek. With no fanfare, we don't even know what his name is, but Gul Evek is going to become very important, and we will see plenty more on Deep Space Nine. Also, on Next Generation and Voyager, he will show up. So Richard Poe did such a good job in that one little scene. They're like, this is going to be a major Gul. And lastly, because I think this is the one that I really enjoyed, Jeffrey Blake, who plays the young guy, previously starred with Terry Farrell in the series Paper Dolls, where he played a love interest. And we don't have a clip, but we do have a photo that will blow your friggin' mind. Michael, there is Terry Farrell with some full talent 80s hair. Yeah. Look at that.
They were like, let's blow it out. And she was like, yeah, sure, do whatever. And then she was like, oh boy, that's...
No, blow it out? Oh, no, I thought you said blow it up, because that's what we did. Amazing. Interesting that the series Paper Dolls only lasted for 13 episodes, but did you know that Jonathan Frakes Riker did 11 of those 13 episodes on the show? So it's basically a Star Trek prequel, because that happened before either Deep Space Nine or The Next Generation. I believe it was 83 or 84, something in that world. Mike, what do you have from the Deep Space Nine companion?
Hold on, let me get some reverb up on this. Biatch.
Star
Trek Deep Space Nine companion Terry D. Edwards with Paul Ambla.
Wow, that, you know what? I'm sorry, buddy. Now you have to sing it every single week.
Keith, you can tell they didn't love the episode because it's only 2 pages.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a couple of things. You know, it was the proto-universe storyline that fascinated Trombetta, but because it was considered abstract, that part of the episode became secondary, he comments, and that, he felt, robbed the story of its emotional balance. Though it was obvious to anyone familiar with basic Star Trek philosophy that the crew couldn't possibly destroy a sub-universe that contained life, Trombetta says he can understand if people didn't feel the ethical problem on an emotional level. It was a very difficult show, says Ira Stephen Bear. When the tech premise that Trombetta brought in proved problematic, a succession of staff writers struggled valiantly, reshaping the story until Michael Piller took the final pass at the teleplay. It was Piller, according to Trombetta, who asked that the emphasis shift to the Trill Initiate storyline, which allowed for the revelation of several titillating details about Dax's personal life, including her fondness for workouts with beefy alien wrestlers. I think Dax has a pretty healthy libido, smiles the episode's director, David Livingston. Here, Keith, the next passage I highlighted because it shows so the direct opposite between men and women. You ready?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think Dax has a pretty healthy libido, smiles episode's director, David Livingston. When Arjun came to her door, I wanted her to look as sexy as possible. I wanted her to be a knockout, and she did look pretty spectacular. The choice of putting the science officer in a towel was calculated. The audience is thinking, what's she doing with this guy, says Livingston. Well, she was working out with him, Winky. Okay, now let's see what Terry Farrell had to say.
Yeah, I'd be very curious to see what Terry has to say about that.
Dax is trying to shock Arjun into trusting her, explains Terry Farrell. Her job is to shock him into being himself because he's not ready to become a host. She even leads him to believe that she slept with this wrestler, but she didn't. She's just playing with Arjun's head. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
a very calculated, insightful actress decision versus let's put her in a towel. Dax's choice of drinks in this case, a black hole, is also calculated, says Farrell. Although Dax seems to be genuinely like them. I have a feeling they're very alcoholic, Farrell laughs. In the first version of the script, she requested a Bloody Mary. But the change clearly reflects the desire to create the greatest response in poor Arjun.
It's funny, I took a black hole as a hangover cure.
Well, she has a different
opinion.
Either way. One of director Livingston's favorite elements of the episode resulted in some extra attention being paid to what might otherwise be a throwaway detail. I loved the voles, he says. I wanted to see those suckers. I wanted to shoot them up close. Initially, the script was written so that we didn't see them as they scurried about, but I said, no, we've got to see them. So Michael Westmore designed this wonderful little creature, and I shot big close-ups. And then finally, the episode features a second appearance after Melora by actor Ron Taylor as the opera-loving host of the station's Klingon restaurant, and an appearance by Richard Poe as an annoying Cardassian officer who has no useful information on dealing with voles.
Yeah, well, there you go.
There you go. Thank you.
I'm impressed about the difference between you and me, as opposed to like keeping it like mint condition and perfect. You actually are highlighting passages in the book as a true reference guide.
Yeah,
I like it.
Well, I'm trying to guess like what you're going to talk about, and then highlight things that I think might be like little extra tidbits. It's a collaborative art form, Keith. Collaborative art form.
So collaborative. So, speaking of collaborating, what was going on in The Next Generation in the other Star Trek world? Of course, the episode was The Eye of the Beholder, where a lieutenant commits suicide to figure out what's going on with that. And Worf and Troy might be doing it. That's that is... Season 7 of Next Gen is such a mystery to me, because Season 6 was so good. It was just like top to bottom, like banger after another. And Season 7 had some really bad episodes and some episodes that I completely don't remember. And this is one of them. Like, I remember the Worf Troy thing, but like, I was like, wait, what happened? And I had to look at pictures and like, oh, I've seen this episode. Like, I've seen every episode of Next Gen at least 4 times. But this one was just one that dropped off for me. So there you go. So the guest stars on Deep Space Nine were Jeffrey Blake as Arjun, Ron Taylor as the Klingon chef, and of course Richard Poe as Gul Evek. So Mike, what do you say we hop into the screening room and discuss Playing God?
I love it. I can't wait to do it. Keith, I have to say before we start, I just got a notification that we have a new YouTube subscriber, which, I usually don't announce on the show, but this person's handle is absolutely amazing. I just got an email that pops through. It says, Chesterfield St. Grumpleshire has subscribed to you on YouTube.
That's a great handle. So welcome, Chesterfield
St. Grumpleshire.
St. Grumpleshire. Wow. I mean, that is both a good handle and definitely what I'm going to name my next cat.
100%. Yes. All right, here we go.
Okay, so here we are in the teaser. And Bashir and a Trill dude are getting off the runabout discussing Dax. The Trill dude is up for joining and is going to be tested by Dax. He's scared of her because Dax has traditionally washed out a lot of initiates. And apparently they have eliminated more than 50 in the last 200 years. So Dax has been doing this for a while. They head to Quark's to meet Dax. Dax isn't in bed. Nuh-uh. She's up gambling with a bunch of Ferengis, but we also get some numbers about Trills, and I think this is sort of important.
Yeah, really good. Let me see if I remember, in fact.
Okay.
I believe there are 300 selected initiates for every the other way around. 5,000 initiates for only 300 hosts.
Well done.
Yeah.
And if you're doing the math in your head, it's 6% of the initiates get the worm. So yeah, very, very tough. So Arjun, the candidate, is shocked to discover Dax at the Tongo table gambling with a bunch of Ferengi. The Tongo table, which I now own in Playmates scale. You can check it out and look at my Star Trek toys from Dazbot Toys. They make an amazing Tongo table. And now you can see it in action in this episode. Dax teases Arjun for being stuffy and not knowing how to play Tongo and takes him to his quarters. And that is our teaser. So I don't know, the stakes really high so far. So in Act 1, the next morning, Arjun arrives at Dax's quarters to be greeted by her Tinder date. She's still in the shower, and she arrives in a towel and teases him about being early. So we mentioned this scene in the information from the book. The psychological mind games that Dax is playing with this guy.
Although, hold on. I hate to do this to you, Terry. I know that you were trying to make it not seem like you were just, casually banging this beefy alien. But if I'm not mistaken, Keith, and I don't think I am because I watched it like half an hour ago.
Uh-huh.
Isn't her first line, "Oh, you're not supposed to be here till next week"?
Not next week.
Or tomorrow or whatever. Meaning that she didn't expect him to come that morning. Which means she couldn't have pre-planned this.
No, she met him the night before, remember?
Oh, you're right. Okay.
He was just a little bit early for the appointment. But the thing that I wonder about, right? So if Dax's goal is to do this like psychological warfare and shake this guy up, was she already planning that by playing Tongo that night? Because she sort of made the assumption that he was going to be uptight and need to be broken up a little bit. So I bet that there was an element of that was performative as well.
Yeah, and they make it clear that Curzon was that way too. So that could very well have been the Curzon influence kind of help making her want to F with him. Yeah, for sure. And honestly, whether or not she was banging this dude,
right? I think that in a weird way is a little bit 90s influenced. Not from like the horniness of it, right? But from the like, why shouldn't she be banging that dude?
Right. Yeah.
Like, who cares?
Yeah.
Like, she's single. Like, and we know that Dax is somebody who, we've established as a character, Dax gets around. She dates. She's interested in new people and new stuff, and she's single. And why the heck not? But I do like the sort of psychological warfare of it all. She does say an interesting thing in here that it takes her longer to get ready as a female, and asks Arjun to order her a black hole, which I took as a hangover cure. But either way, and she was wrestling with the dude from before. He's super uptight. She's super casual. That dynamic is very clear.
Her quarters are awesome.
Her quarters are great.
I love also that little like triangle glass like prop, that practical prop there. I don't even know what the hell it is, but it's cool as hell.
Cool as hell, the whole thing. I would love to have quarters like that. If I had the money, I'd make my basement like that. That'd be really cool. So in Ops, Chief O'Brien and Kira are crawling around in the tubes hunting for Cardassian voles, essentially rats. They're spreading everywhere and chewing through the circuitry.
But I guess because it's their mating season. Is this still the first year on Deep Space Nine?
I guess it must be, right?
Right, because
but I think what they were saying was that as they're expanding, because the station's so freaking huge, that a lot of it is empty. So as they're expanding into their territory, they're starting to run around.
So Keith, I have an insight that's not in the companion, and I didn't hear it in your notes, but when we get to the screenshot here, this is it. So recently, I helped my mom install a bidet, as I've spoken many times about in her house, but I had to get a flexible hose because she has her supply line from her pipe to her toilet is a straight little tubey tube that is that. What Cisco is holding here, the practical effect here is a supply line for a toilet, and that's what they're using as their vole
That
pipe.
Makes perfect sense.
Yep.
Makes perfect sense. That's how you save money on a show. Cisco reminds them to use stun and not kill the voles. Because that's the Federation. It's nice.
His response to that, look at his face. What a choice.
He's delighted. He's delighted by that toilet tank thing. Dax and Arjun enter and meet Cisco. We get a great shot of butts. So many butts.
All the butts.
David Livingston was on a dry spell before he ever did this episode. We have many lingering shots of butts.
After the butt screenshot, these two responses are very creepy. Ben's leering. He's like, "What do you think of these butts?"
Yeah, like those. Do you like butts?
That guy clearly does not like butts.
We have all kinds of butts for you. I mean, at least it was all like a menu of butts, not just one single butt. Oh, boy. Sisko reinforces that Dax is a scary judge. But Jadzia says, nah, that was Curzon, not me. Then she shoots a vole and hands it to Arjun. Later that day, Dax and Arjun zoom through the wormhole in a runabout. His shoulder pads look ridiculous. I hope you got a shot from the side, because they're all bunched up. Yeah, is he wearing somebody else's costume? Because it's like
Arthur's.
It's like his shoulder pads up like this.
Looks like B. Arthur.
Okay, so before Mike dropped out, I believe we were making fun of those ridiculous shoulder pads that were riding up. You could lose an eye that way with those ridiculous shoulder pads. I don't like. It seems like it just didn't fit him at all once he sat down.
Didn't really fit him standing up either, to be honest.
No, did they recast somebody like right the last second, or was that just not their day? Building up a ridiculous initiate suit. Anyway, so we find out that Jadzia's evaluator, when she was in this position, was actually Curzon. And she says, relax, I'm not going to make this hard on you.
You'd think that would have been a conflict of interest, right? You shouldn't be adjudicating a potential...
Well, I don't think...
Oh, I guess with only 6%, I guess everybody's a potential, right? Yeah.
Well, everybody's a potential, and at that point, Curzon wasn't dying, so he wasn't up that year.
Right.
So that wasn't one of those... Look, it's always a possibility, but it's not like he was like... They're not interviewing to be themselves, right? They're just interviewing people in general. But we also find out in here that Curzon actually washed Jadzia out, specifically. Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. Then they run into something. It's a subspace pocket, and it's stuck on their nacelle.
Not a Tuma.
It's not the Tuma. Back in the station, O'Brien and Kira try to keep... Oh, wait, no. Back at the station, O'Brien and Kira keep trying to figure out how to get rid of the voles. Quark arrives with a dead vole complaining, and Kira is not hearing it. Kira has no time for Quark right now. He shows off a sonic lightsaber, and of course, Quark is susceptible to it.
You mean a flashlight?
Yes, the flashlight. Yes, he flashes a flashlight at Quark and almost kills him. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
Dax and Arjun then arrive back through the wormhole asking for help with their subspace seaweed. They got some goo on their nacelle. But we don't know what's going on with it. But we figured, let's not pay any attention to that. And they head to the Klingon restaurant, where they are serenaded once more with Klingon music. Dax sings along, and Arjun looks uncomfortable. He also doesn't like Klingon food.
Which is also like he doesn't like Klingon food, but that's apparently like she's like, you shouldn't try to impress me. What's funny is this whole episode's about like not trying to like please your driving instructor, but at the same time, he doesn't really do anything that is like blatantly bad. He's just like trying really hard and really smart, and he's just like a good dude.
Well, however, look at that screenshot. He is wearing a ridiculous deep V and a Sweeney Todd haircut. So something is wrong. Something is very wrong in that whole situation there. So, but yeah, I mean, I think we'll definitely talk through their motivations and dynamics there, because I think there's something interesting in this story. It doesn't show up on screen, but the idea they're going for, I think there's something there. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we learn that he was pressured into joining by his father.
Which is a great tag team from last week when we kind of had that storyline with Jake. I liked that.
Mm-hmm. Right, so it's sort of the opposite of what Sisko did, and certainly a red flag for Jadzia here in adjudicating him. It's clear he doesn't know what he wants or who he is, and he hopes a symbiote will give him some ideas. So all of that seems pretty disqualifying for joining based on the criteria that we're talking about. O'Brien then zooms with Gullavec about the voles, and he's not helpful.
No.
But I love their view screen.
The view screen is super cool. I don't know what the tech is, but it's rad. I also love that they just friggin' hang up on him, which is the best.
They hang up on him. The screen disappears. I've talked about it many times. I love it. It's cool. Very, very cool. I don't know about the aspect ratio. If you're watching a movie on that thing, you're going to get
you can play Mario Kart. Be kind of cool, though.
Yeah, fair enough. So Cisco, then Dax and Cisco are playing chess. Cisco can already tell that the initiate is flaming out. She says he doesn't bring anything to the host. And Cisco encourages her to confront him. She doesn't want to do that because that's what Curzon did to her. And we really get a sense of how resentful she is of Curzon and how Curzon treated her at this stage. Later in the science lab, a vole messes up the containment field and the seaweed does a lot of glowing. But we're in Act 3 and have no idea what's happening. Mm-hmm. So in the room, Cisco is pissed. The seaweed might be dangerous. And he's like, you know what? Fuck the voles. Phasers to kill. So, that didn't last very long. Arjun realizes he messed up and tries to say, no, really, I have goals. Mm-hmm. And she...
yeah.
Mm-hmm. And she calls him on just telling her what she wants to hear. She says she's worried that he's not preparing himself for being joined. He studied for all the tests, but doesn't have any actual drive. He's super pissed and turns on Dax. He says she's the one below standards and says he knows Curzon tried to wash her out. Yeah, that didn't go well.
No, his temper wasn't manned properly.
No. So later, Dax says the goo is expanding, and it's actually a proto-universe. It's growing, and it's going to obliterate not just the station, but the entire system. It's a freaking universe. It's going to blow up the entire Federation.
Which is a big detail to drop 36 minutes into a 45-minute episode.
And everybody's response to it is Cisco in that screenshot.
Mm-hmm. Well, Cisco's like, give me an hour. They're like, every 65 seconds, it expands. He's like, give me an hour.
They have 3 hours before it expands again, but they decide they're going to squish it and squish the proto-universe. All of this, just take it very nonchalantly. Yeah. But the more importantly, we have to get to Arjun here.
Yeah, he's drinking blue.
He's in Quark's, I believe that would be Romulan ale. He is getting drunk.
Mm-hmm. He's playing
Quark
drunk.
Says,
my favorite thing, he's playing drunk.
Playing drunk, which he immediately stops once Dax gets there. Mm-hmm. So was he playing drunk for Quark's benefit? I don't know. Quark says, yeah, just go bang one out in the holosuite. And he says, Dax blew up my life. Quark then tells a story about working his way up as an apprentice on the fast track to success. Then he banged it out with the boss's sister and got fired.
That was awesome. The rule of acquisition, don't bang the boss's sister. That was funny.
It was funny. And I also really loved, like, there's supposed to be some, like, uplifting story about, but then I overcame it and I have this bar. It's like, now you're screwed. Yeah. You get one shot and now you're going to be miserable like I am.
That's very Quark.
I loved it. Welcome to misery. So we go back to the science lab, and Dax says so much technobabble, it actually literally triggered my Alexa to say technobabble herself. This is why you shouldn't set your prompt to computer and then watch Star Trek. It happened twice this episode. I have no idea what she's working on, what Dax is working on, but there's a problem. She's found indications of life in the proto-universe. Again, this seems like a really interesting story. I would have loved it had been part of the episode. Act 4 begins, and it turns out that time is moving faster in the proto-universe. And there has been time for a species to have evolved in the last
he's like,
few
millions of years could have passed in the last hour.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a really interesting concept too, right? Time doesn't.
No shit. Already in 2 seasons in, think about the times we've found like enormous life existence changing revelations about time, space, existence, and all, and that we casually toss off as like,
yeah. And it's such an interesting story. There actually is a great episode of Voyager, which does actually do a good episode about time operating at different speed in a different place, which I thought was fantastic. Definitely worth a watch. I forget what it's called, but anyway, but that's not what we're doing here. They decide now we can't squish it in the containment field because there's life in there, but it's going to blow up the lab when it expands, and it does. It doesn't just blow up the lab; it blows 2 giant holes in the hull of the station. Again, that's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, at least Kira seems to be playing the stakes a little bit, I will say.
Yeah, Kira's like, who cares? Just squish them.
Squish them like ants. It's us or them.
It's us or them, and Odo is like, hell no, I don't step on ants. Which
Odo was the only person who could deliver the line the way he did, though. That was like, because he's like, I don't just like casually take for granted a new species. He's like, just because we don't understand it, that's a very Odo kind of thing to, obviously it's from personal experience. We get it. It's a good exchange. It's just very brief, very shoehorned, and it's almost worked.
Boy. So Sisko is forced to make a giant ethical decision that affects either an entire civilization or blows up his entire quadrant and anyone who he has ever known or loved. No biggie.
If only something could take his mind off it, Keith, like as if his son was banging a stripper.
Yeah, right. But I just like to point out, but before we get to the banging the stripper part, wouldn't let's say he's making a decision that might blow up the entire quadrant. Maybe like phone a friend. Maybe like talk to Starfleet.
No. He's got to take a walk.
I'm just gonna I feel like this is kind of if you're contemplating blowing up your quadrant, you maybe ought to talk to somebody. But Jake. No, he's gonna go talk to Jake. He heads to his quarters and finds Jake working on a giant laptop.
His MacBook is big.
It's a 1994. They're pretty big.
The compact Presario.
I don't think it's a USB-C in the back of that, but Jake accidentally says he's full on in love with a Dabo girl and wants to invite her to dinner. And Sisko, very understandably, wants to know how old is this Dabo girl? Because Jake is 14, kids.
But he knows how much game Jake has, because it turns out Jake has been tutoring a Dabo girl. But he
mentioned that before, yeah.
Yeah, but Ben doesn't like jump to the expectation that that's the girl he has a crush on. So for all Ben knows, his son is interested in banging multiple Dabo girls.
And which is perfectly natural. However, that Dabo girl better not be interested in banging Jake, because I don't know what the statutory rape laws are on Deep Space Nine, but let's cool it, buddy.
Well, if you're about to blow up the quadrant, let your son get his rocks off with the Dabo. Come on, before you blow him up.
I mean, that's true. If he is considering destroying the entire quadrant and all of the Federation and everything we've ever known, sure. Anyway, what the heck is going on? I love how he begins with the right question and then completely dismisses it. Anyway, Dax runs into drunk Arjun at Quark's because that wasn't interesting enough. Let's go back to the drunk guy. And he says, "Put me out of my misery." And she says, "Hold on,
I like you now."
Yeah, we're fine. Jadzia. But I think this is interesting because Jadzia says, I was very similar to you when I met Curzon. He was terrible to her and he washed her out of the program. But him doing that helped her finally figure out what she wanted. And she fought to reapply, which I believe is pretty rare to be able to get back into the program after having washed out. She finally had passion. And then she specifically requested Dax when Curzon was dying. As a pretty big middle finger to Dax there, but Dax like yeah, sure, who has a wicked sense of humor and enjoyed the irony. She says, I'm going to give you another chance, Sweeney, but you've got to figure out what you want. Cisco arrives and says, we're going to try to take the universe back through the wormhole. And she decides, life or death stakes. We're going to save the literal universe. Let's take the drunkest pilot in the universe to go and do this. He's
level 5, Keith. Level 5. He's only level 3.
I know. Well, that's true. I mean, who knows? Maybe Romulan ale steadies the hands.
O'Brien's like, what? All right.
Yeah, sure. What's happening this week? I don't know.
But let's use the big view screen again. Come on.
Yep. I mean, it's so cool. So in Act 5, they beam the universe onto the runabout, and Arjun and Dax head to the wormhole. While they travel, the containment field starts to break down because they keep running into nodes. They're going to have to stop because if they run it anymore, they're going to blow stuff up. So they're going to have to fly manually through the nodes. Good thing they have a fancy pilot named Arjun. Cool visuals, though.
Yeah, sure.
So I thought, like, for 1994 TV, I thought that looked amazing. Yeah.
Devoid of literally any drama, suspense, or thrilling anything. But okay.
Oh, I'm just talking, but like literally the screenshot's cool.
Yeah,
visually, it's cool. I have no idea what's happening.
Yeah, it's like a Windows 7 screensaver.
That's fair. So after some tight moments, they get through. Huzzah! He has to go manual. Whatever. Who cares? They take the universe back to where it belongs. Like, where is that?
No details necessary, Keith. Let's just get that. We got 11 seconds. Go.
So they get it over to the Gamma Quadrant. Like, isn't it gonna blow up the Gamma Quadrant?
And he's like, no. He's like, we there's no room. And she's like, oh, there's 17 feet. And he's like, but we're only 14 feet. And she's like, do it anyway. And he's like, okay, I see. Literally, there's a line that goes, I don't see it. I don't see it. I see it.
Yeah, he sees it. So they tuck the universe back into the subspace interface pocket.
And then through the poop chute, they come back.
Pocket. Interface pocket. All is well, and Dax says she may indeed recommend Arjun for joining someday. Hooray! She has now individuated from Curzon. Her therapist is happy. Everybody's therapist is happy. But we have a lot to discuss moving forward. But first, we have to do a famous vocab quiz, Mike.
Oh, we sure do.
And now it's time for Mike and Deglio's Star Trek Vocabulary Quiz. All right, Mike. I feel like your therapist can explain this to you. Mike, what is localized entropy?
Well, Keith, when a man turns 40...
Yeah, but wait a minute. That's not localized.
This is one part of my body. It's on the struggle bus these days.
Look, the entropy is all of me. I don't know. I wish I were localized.
I gotta be honest. I have no idea. What's it's the weakening of the field around the universe thing.
I don't know. Who cares?
All right, Keith. I think it's best we just skip the vocab quiz.
Let's go home. Okay, well, here we are back at Quarks. I could use some Romulan ale trying to sort through all the things that happened and or didn't happen in here, but let's begin with some wormholes in the plot, Mike.
Yeah. Sort of like everything to do with the universe plot, I think is fair to say.
Yeah.
It doesn't really make any sense. The science, the lack of stakes, how it got stuck there, where it came from, anything?
Yeah, well, It's not that I think it doesn't make sense, because I think that there are ways to sort of Star Trek make sense all of this, right? Mm-hmm. They run into a subspace pocket they were not expecting. They pick up this little universe goo. It starts expanding. It's a little micro universe. It has a different time frame. Whatever. Okay, subspace stuff's weird there. I get it. And all the sort of machinations they do, like, let's contain it. We'll have to crush it. Oh shit, there's life in there. We have to put it back where it was. All right, all of that sort of nominally makes sense. What doesn't make sense to me is the stakes element of it. Like that they just treat it like it's nothing, and yet it's like gigantic, earth-shattering.
Yeah, you remember back in season 1 when there was like, we were meeting one of the first new species in the new quadrant, and there was like pages and pages of protocols as to how to deal with new life and how to welcome them and all this stuff. And now we have a whole new universe, and we're like, we could squish it. That's like our and then like, let me go talk to Jake. Like you said, there's no protocol here.
Well, it's especially if you are making a decision. The consequences of one half of that decision is the annihilation of your quadrant. Right. That's absurd.
Right.
It's absurd that just happens out of nowhere, and there are no stakes to that, there's no weight to that, no help, no nothing. We're talking about a Dabo girl. Like, what the hell? That's so I think it's less the Trek science of the proto-universe and the whatever and the subspace. Like, sure, whatever. I think it's an interesting idea. We sort of did that on Next Gen before, so it's a little bit of a retread. It's just undercooked. It obviously, we read from the production standpoint that they moved away from it, but it's too big a thing to make your B story, right? If you're not going to make that your A story, find another B story, because I get you're doing a metaphor about playing God and having, like making these decisions and having consequences and other things. So we're doing that 3 times, right? We're doing that with the Initiate, we're doing it with the Vols, we're doing it with the universe. Okay, I get sort of metaphorically what you're going for, but you have to like let it be real. Each of those, the stakes for those have to be real. Otherwise it doesn't. This episode would have been so much better if it had just been the Vols, right? And whether or not we kill the Vols or not, we're Starfleet. We're working very hard to sort of humanely, like we try to move the Vols, whatever. We're not going to kill them. We're not going to kill them. And then just have the stakes, have stuff go wronger and wronger and wronger, and box them into a corner. Like, we have to kill all of these things. And I make that be our ethical quandary, if that's your B story.
I think that my feel is that, they say in the companion here that they didn't think that they could make when they were reading the script revisions, they didn't think they could make the universe, the ethics of the universe subplot make sense to the audience, right? And I think this shows like an early show, as good as the episodes have been, an early show not trusting their audience, not trusting their convictions, not quite understanding, like still feeling it out. And it sounds to me like, from what I've heard and what I've heard you say, is that as they go further, they start to trust the audience more and trust their scripts more. And I think this just suffered from them not going for it, right? Them second guessing too much, and it's weaker for it.
And the problem with this is that it's not that the audience didn't get the ethical quandary of this; it's that they didn't get the ethical quandary of it. Yeah. And like, well, how can you treat it so nonchalantly? Yeah. Like, we get it; it's a really big deal. So that was a mess. The Vol thing, which should have been the full B story, I got it, and I thought the Dax emotional of it all made sense to me. So let's talk about our best moment, and then let's talk about the big picture here.
I actually really loved the scene with Jake and Sisko. I'm not going to put it as my favorite, but I want to give it a shout out. It's completely out of nowhere. It's contextually not even adjacent to the through lines of the episode, but it was a well done scene. Their scenes are always really good. and I love his dadding. My favorite scene, though, I think is, I do think it's the scene when he's not drunk at the bar anymore, and she sort of explains her whole thought process, and she's giving him a second chance, and I think that scene is the most clearly written and most coherent. I think it's my favorite. That's the best I can give you. You?
Yeah, I like, I guess it's sort of a comment about the whole thing. Like the story that they're telling with Dax's relationship with Curzon and the sort of turn there. I like that thematically. I like that as a character beat, understanding Dax more. However, the structure, and I can see that this was rewritten and sort of like panic written at the end, because the A to B to C of that story development is muddy in this. And so there's a lot of repetition of themes and conversations. There are sort of threads dropped there. It's just I like the story they're telling, but the way that they told it was pretty messy from a writing standpoint. As a writer, like when you write a scene, every sentence in that scene, every word has to be necessary, and it has to be moving your story forward. It has to be, it's a puzzle, right? It has to be absolutely, and then every subsequent scene has to be absolutely necessary, and there can be no repetition. It has to be about we're adding things, right? We're working vertically, not horizontally. And there was just a lot of like, a little bit there, and then like, say that again, but then like restate it mostly the same way, but change this little thing, and it was muddy.
Well, like there's the old thing called the sniff test, right? Like if you really want to know what's working when you watch a cut of something, what's the sniff test? What has any emotional resonance whatsoever? So if I'm being honest, actually what I think the best moment, maybe not favorite, but the best moment of the episode is when we see Renee for 5 seconds and he delivers the one line about, and it's clearly a parallel to him and people not understanding his species and us not understanding this new species. And when he says, we can't squish it like a bug, just because we don't understand it doesn't make it real. It rings the most true. It means the most. And it is a clear indicator that that's what the episode should have been. But it's not the episode we got. So
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right about that.
Right.
So all right. So yeah, let's talk about this. All
right. So the biggest flaw of this episode is, not everything has to be shocking surprise or suspense or thrilling or whatnot. But the problem here is that, and it's also okay if an episode is paint by numbers. But if it's paint by numbers and all the numbers before the show even starts, that's not good. You know what I mean? Like, there was no doubt at any point. The second Dax shows like disregard for this guy before it even starts. And exactly, as soon as they say he's a good pilot, how the episode ends. Like, right away. And it does nothing. There are no twists, turns, and spinnies except for they introduce a gigantic science fiction plot 27 minutes into the episode, which then kind of withers on the vine and is unsatisfying in the way that it's handled, and the stakes are... And it's not just that they're not handled. It's that they're handled completely antithetically by a cast we've come to know, right? We know how these people would respond. Dax and Bashir would want to study it. Ben would want to like talk to Starfleet and talk to all these people and gather counsel as to how he would. But we don't get any of that. It's so flippant. You're like, what? It doesn't even, what? The Vol thing is like there's some levity to it, and I think there's some fun moments, but nothing. It's the whole thing just feels. Even the companion gave it a page. They're just like, yeah, no. And they say it. They're like, it didn't work. And it doesn't work. That's the long short of it.
I think that the Dax story, which is the A story here, it becomes
the A story. That's the interesting thing in the script. It wasn't supposed to be, and they rewrote it to make it the A story. That's whew.
And what it is an interesting paragraph of backstory. But it's not a story, right? The entire journey that Dax doesn't go on a journey here. All we do is sort of tell the audience that Dax went through this experience, or that Jadzia went through this experience, which I think is fascinating. I think it's great. But there's no story here. There's no development. There's no A to B to C in what Jadzia did or what Dax did or what this guy did. Nobody actually does anything. We just sort of fill in backstory. And I think that's really where it fails, right? And we don't see people changing or trying different things. Now, I think there's a good episode in this, right? The themes, the ideas, right? I really resonate with the young guy who has trying to live up to expectations, have been encouraged, let's say, to succeed and be elite and do things that will bring the family pride or whatever, and finding yourself 25 years old and like, oh, wait a minute, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Like, I've been working so hard and I've been playing by all the rules, but I don't have any, but I'm missing the passion and the drive, and I don't know why I'm here. It's me at opera school, right?
Sure,
I'm exactly that guy.
But he doesn't, the finale of this episode isn't him showing that passion or drive. It just shows him, he can fly good. It doesn't, he doesn't overcome that challenge that is presented. And it seems like it focuses much more on Dax's obstinance than it does this guy's lack of anything, in my opinion. So I hear what you're saying, but that's not the episode presented.
And that's I guess the turn for Dax is, or for Jadzia specifically, is I start really pissed off about how I was treated by Curzon for being this person, for being the person who is just sort of doing it because I think I should, but I don't have any passion or drive. And I hated him for putting me through that. And then she's like, oh, wait a minute, I'm learning through this experience that maybe it wasn't all bad, that he forced me to discover what I wanted and discover my passion, right? That's sort of the story that they're telling there. But again, there's no story in the plot of what happened.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
She doesn't do like this. We sort of get told that all of these things happened before and are happening now, but like her behavior isn't, nobody does anything.
Yeah, it's not great.
It's an idea in search of a story. And I love the idea. I just would have loved there have been a story there.
Yeah, don't disagree.
And I think that they wrote his character, Arjun, and I don't think it's necessarily the performer, but that character to me was very unlikable. I didn't like him ever.
Yes, I was not pulling for him. I didn't really. It was more apathetic than anything. I didn't dislike him. It was apathetic.
And apathetic is exactly, and I get it, right? They're telling the story of a character who is apathetic.
Yep.
And that's hard to do. I did it myself in the show that I wrote about myself, about my own apathy. Like I wrote a show about finding out what the hell I wanted to do with my life, right? And starting from that apathetic place. I totally get it. But I was not drawn to this character. So therefore I didn't really care.
Yeah.
I don't care if he is successful or not. He doesn't care. He just wasn't that nice of a guy. He wasn't that interesting.
Yeah, I think we share that. I mean, so if you disagree, and I'd love to hear from anybody who really liked this episode more than us, because I'm giving it a 4. I just don't think there's anything there it's not. It's more that it's not losing stars because it's bad. It's just not gaining them because there's no episode for me.
Well, and you know what it is? If you look at it in today's context, what is he? He's bland, entitled white guy who has like had all the advantages and like, meh, I don't know. I'm just sort of here. And like everything's fine, everything's taken care of. Like given all these elite
you're
things.
right. And if there are 5,000 people vying for those slots, then like, yeah, I guess she's got a point. Like, what the hell do you offer? Not much.
Yeah, of course he should be washed out. Yeah. He doesn't even want it. He doesn't give a shit. He's just sort of like hanging out. And yeah. No, he should 100% should be washed out.
This just in. Keith and I didn't like this. Well, Keith, what is your number?
Yeah, I'm gonna give it.
So I said 40, right? That's what I said.
You said 40. I'm actually gonna give it 62.
Okay.
not based on the quality of the storytelling, but based on the importance of the information, the backstory for Dax, right? They gave us good information, interesting information for Dax.
We got a ratio. We got a percentage of how many people make it. That's what we got. 6%.
6% make it. That was it. Well, but also her relationship with Curzon and the sort of internal conflict. You saw Dax and Italki.
That's what it is. Let's be honest. That's the 50. That's the 50.
Yeah, well, that's at least 4.5, right?
Yeah. No. Hey, do you want to give us some stars? You can do so at patreon.com/KM. Get one for your friends. Get a Patreon subscription for a month for your mom and dad. That's a great stocking stuffer.
So you can watch the last 20 minutes of Mike watching this bad episode.
And a Let's Play we keep promising and haven't done yet, but we are going to do it.
We are 100% going to do it. All right, so next week, we are going to be discussing profit and loss. And Mike, I have good news moving forward.
It gets better?
This is the last stinker of season 2.
Ooh, girl. All right.
So we're buckle up. You know, we're on the upslope. We're on the upslope. So
I'll take it.
It is good news.
I'll take it.
All right, folks. Well, if you're still here, thank you very much. Please give us a like and subscribe. If you're listening to the podcast-only audio version,
God bless you this
week.
Give
us a rating and review on whatever podcast service you are listening to.
I have to Frankenstein
check out our other shows.
Thing together. Oof.
Yeah, Mike, I can feel Mike's soul dying for the editing he's about to have to do this afternoon. Anyway, check out our other shows, K&M Geekly, and look at my Star Trek toys. I can't believe how hard it was for me to come up with the names of our 2 other shows that we do every week. Till then, this has been... Thank you for watching K&M Entertainment. If you enjoyed our particular brand of nonsense, please like and subscribe. Or become one of our patrons at patreon.com/KNM.